Adi. Adi Parige.
Adi Parige. Thank you. Sorry for mispronouncing that.
It's okay. Lifetime of it. I'm always excited to hear interpretations. No.
Well, thank you for submitting, and thank you for this amazing film. The last car is layered with subplots and themes from the barbaric practice of sealing, the battle between man and savage, and the abuse that Freddy is delivering to his crew. As a director, how do you ensure that these themes are consistent throughout the film and balance it with the overall story of what's happening?
Yeah. Even more than directing, that's more of a writing and editing question for me. Something to tell you a lot when you're writing is, everyone should be moving your protagonist forward in your film. But I kind of hate that as well sometimes, because sometimes we put characters in films, and I'm very guilty of this in past work, where side characters or they're just kind of there to help you make the next page or the next scene, but they're not actually moving forward themselves. And something I really tried here when I was in the writing mode was that every single character would have a finishing point, while also moving thus our protagonist towards this final moment on the shore. But I really wanted to make sure that, especially because something I'm trying to unpack as I try to unpack colonial kind of storytelling, is unpacking a lot of the gray area that existed, with the two white sealers. I didn't want to only put an image of the bad white guy, even though that was a pretty bad white guy, the dude in red, Freddy. But yeah, it was also bringing their story into the front, because something to remember is also Ireland and Scotland are kind of ground zero for British colonialism. So it's things like that that kind of helped, to go back to your original question, to kind of bring a through line.
Yeah, you're trying to find the sort of the humanity and not just your characters, but also even in the historical context of what was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is a time period, this is in the 1700s, it's supposed to be?
Late 1700s, top of the 1800s in New Zealand. The historical background is that kind of hidden from history but rediscovered through shipping logs. They came to find that a bunch of Indian sailors were on these East India Company ships. And they went everywhere, man. They were South America, Alaska, North America, Africa, wherever, Europe, and at the bottom of the world in New Zealand. So as an Indian person myself, I found that very fascinating. But yeah, late 1700s.
As a period piece, this film is a huge undertaking, especially given the historical context. I'm curious, what were some of the challenges that you felt you faced, given, not just the location of where you were filming this, but even just the details of the wardrobe and everything that you had to take consideration to make this feel somewhat accurate.
Yeah. It's also kind of not 100%, but it's heavily undocumented period, so we don't know a lot about who these men were, but there are paintings and interpretations of who they were, so it was just a lot of research. But that's kind of my favorite bit of it, is the reading and perusing through photos, and not photos in this case, but paintings and that kind of thing. And then also just got to shout out my production designer, Louis. He's just a genius. It's so funny to hear him be unhappy with some of the stuff in this, because I'm always really? I thought we did a good job. And he's no, we could have had one more seal rack or whatever for first. Yeah, he was a huge part of kind of realizing that. But also, we made a period film where there was no infrastructure really, so that was also easier. It was more about costume and getting these seal racks and really finding a piece of land that we could shoot on that felt untouched, so that when we put these elements on there, it kind of transported us.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely. It's interesting how I feel as creatives we're maybe never happy with our work, because we're always trying to kind of move it forward.
Yeah.
A little bit. How the hell were you able to get seals in your movie? Because I'm sure you had to go through some red tape to even be close enough to film or get involved in some way.
Yeah, we put a casting call out on Actors Access. So it's interesting. So the area we shot on is this little peninsula that juts out onto the sea and off the southeast coast of the North Island of New Zealand, right? And that is in New Zealand referred to as dockland, that specific thing, which is Department of Conservation. So Department of Conservation to shoot on that land normally is like 2,500 flat fee, then these are all New Zealand dollars, and then $250 a day, and then 500 for every crew and cast member you're bringing on each per day, right? But we were a student production at the time of shooting that stuff, so they gave it to us for $250. Yeah, and a lot of what I had to do, kind of in the health and safety bit of that, they're like, so how are you gonna kill these seals on camera? Because they had to read my script, and I was like, what we did was use a lot of long lenses, and kind of also figuring out how we're gonna do that led into kind of how we display violence in the film and depict it, which is we kind of look away at the moment that it happens, and that was kind of, I can't totally remember now, but either how we shot the seals was informed by that kind of decision making, or as we were figuring out how we were going to do the seal killings, that informed the rest of the violence in the film.
Yeah.
So
it's
a lot of long lenses.
I also noticed there was that moment, the juxtaposition at the end where you have sort of the one seal that's like in the middle of the others, and they're kind of not fighting, but there seems to be that tension, and like there was that alpha male moment where like now the group is. So is that something that you just happened to capture, or?
Yeah, I mean, like, there was so much happening, and this was a pretty micro budget, so during the first or second day of the shoot, I sent, like, the camera crew out, and I said, just, you know, you guys are second unit, like, go and have fun, and, like, get a lot of shots of these seals. And, you know, they're just, like, on 85s and 100s and 120s, and just getting, like, shots of this stuff. And then later on, as I edited the film, I'm like perusing through this stuff and figuring out that last kind of act was a really tough bit, and that shot of like the seals kind of having this little alpha beta moment, I was like, oh, that's what this is. Pump it in there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It was like film guys give that to you.
Yeah, 100%.
Before Freddy meets his fate, he says, "You can't kill me." Is there a double meaning there? Because I know he feels unstoppable, then that ship appears and you realize that there are going to be questions. So maybe it's more of a two-part answer, but like, were they dropped off there, or were they marooned there? Like,
Yeah, they were in this film. They were marooned there, and like, well, dropped off and kind of marooned. So it's like dropped off and then sort of forgotten. And this would actually, in my research, this would happen here and there. Like, they'd get dropped off to do like procure seal skins, and then it'd be like 6 months later, and they would only take 30 members back and leave the other 20 behind.
Wow.
For another freaking 4 months or whatever, you know. And these are like brutal conditions. Like my film was not shot there, but a lot of this happened at the very bottom of New Zealand, which is like right by Antarctica. So you can imagine spending a winter by Antarctica. It's gnarly. But to go back to that line, "You can't kill me," that was improvisation by the actor Mark Matthews, who's a really good friend of mine. And we kind of have a quiet relationship with the other, or God, or this, whatever you want to call it, really. Because I would imagine you'd be thinking about that a lot on an island, on a peninsula with 5 dudes killing seals. And we have one moment where Dasa, before he beats his co-Indian, my fellow co-Indians out here in Queens, plenty of us around. But before he beats Mamoon, he like looks up to the sky, and we shot that. And then when we were shooting this bit, I think Mark just kind of had that internally in, and he took that. I just said, take something up, like give me a line, but take it up. And he thought about it for a second, and he said, "You can't kill me." And I think maybe that leads to his hubris as a character as well. Like, he's invincible. He obviously starts off the film pretty depressed, maybe considering killing himself. And then at the end, he's like vindicated, but then, you know, we take it away from him pretty quickly. Because that dude needs to die.
For sure.
Not Mark, Freddy. Mark is great. The character, yeah.
Kudos on Freddy for doing so well as an actor and making us not like him.
Yes.
As a character. In terms, I want to go back to that mention of research. How long would you say you were doing research and writing before you felt like you were ready to actually start the filming process? Because I know that can be the biggest undertaking, especially as like a writer, director, and editor. Like,
Yeah.
how long would you say, would you estimate that process was for you before you were ready to start production?
It's hard to answer because I feel like I was researching during the edit. You know, like just to kind of justify certain things. Even as simple of a choice as putting 1799 out there, or like I had a bunch of different dates I could have chosen within the range, and I kind of settled on that for research-based reasons. But you know what? This, like, I'm researching something else right now, and it's really freaking dense and like challenging. And in comparison, because I've been thinking about it a lot, this was like pretty easy to research because there really isn't that much material, which is like kind of sad, but also like informed how I did the treatment of the movie, which was kind of like a memorial to a fallen soldier kind of treatment, which is like the general idea of the Lusker. Like there are anecdotes of what happened to them in New Zealand, but there's more anecdotes of what happened to them in their journeys around the world. There were actually mutinies on the ship and stuff like that they went through. So I kind of funneled a lot of these different elements into the film. But then after a while, I also realized like I can't get caught up too much in the research. I have to also fulfill the characters. But a big part of the research, I should also say, was, and then like a huge experience for me, was working with a cultural consultant for the Maori characters. And also like researching, it's not just the historical research, it's like researching Maori depictions by non-Maori filmmakers and like contending with that, and then also changing my script and storytelling to also try and represent maybe a side of Maoris that is not often depicted in cinema, which is, in this case, my massive decision came from my cultural consultant, Rob Thorne, who, you know, encouraged me to have Maya, the woman, make a decision for peace, you know, and often Maoris are represented in media and different things as more in the violent side of things. There's a bigger answer to that, but that's something I'm really proud of in this film, is that she's the wise one, and she stops the cycle of violence in that moment. And you know, it's also interesting to think about what the reaction to her decision would be when she goes back to her iwi, or her tribe. So I don't know. Yeah, the research process is really fulfilling. It's my favorite bit.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing all the research, and I think it's cool that you get to. I mean, it's probably hard that there's no information available, but that gives you the room to kind of like play and decide like what this kind of, you know, history could have been like. So I think this is an interesting kind of vision of what that could have been like. Is there anything else you want to leave us with about the film that maybe we didn't talk about?
Yeah, if you want to get into film festivals, don't make a 35-minute movie. But it's cool. We got into a couple, and that's good. And I'm really happy. Actually, that's kind of the joke answer. I think like fuck people telling you how long a movie should be. Who gives a shit? Just like make the movie you want to make, and like, but like stick to your decisions. That's what I really learned through this process, was finding more confidence in my decisions, and the risk that I took by making it 35 minutes. That means I didn't get into festivals that maybe I would have if it was like 25. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot more feeling that came into it. So if I can impart anything, it's that. Make longer short films.
Thank you so much.